Good morning, everyone. This is your pal Guardian Enzo, and we're here with another Notaku anime chat, number 10 in our reborn, rejuvenated, and rebar Notaku anime channel. And as always, joining me from the great state of Minnesota is the legendary Setsuken. How are you doing this morning, Setsuken?
I'm good. I'm happy to get back here and talk to our friends and viewers and listeners once again.
Yes, both for our listeners and us, this is a safe space. It's a very scary world right now. We talked about this briefly last week, and it strikes me. And forgive me, I am going to incorporate that into my introduction this week just a little bit, but hopefully in a way that doesn't make us too current eventy. But we like to do interesting things with our introduction. So this time around, what I thought I would do is ask a question. If you were to choose any anime character who you could have installed as president of the United States, which anime character would you pick? And obviously, we're going to dispense with constitutional regulations here, as that's a lot of that seems to be going on in the real world too. Never mind, but we're going to dispense with that because never mind the 35-year-old thing, because we wouldn't be getting American citizens in here for the most part anyway. So just it could be anybody. If you wanted to put, 13-year-old Killua in this, I won't quiggle. I wouldn't want him as president, but anyway, so you can pick anybody you like. And would you like me to go first since I'm springing this one on you last minute?
Actually, I'm ready with an
Oh,
answer,
hit
and
me.
it's gonna be an interesting one. I'd probably pick Yagami Light from Death Note, just because I
Oh,
felt bad for the fact that he never got his world domination thing, and it'd be interesting to see how he would actually govern the world in his perfect image. So that's probably not a great answer for all the people involved, because the
wow.
guy's a bit of an egomaniac. But
Wow.
dang, would it be interesting, and it would be a lot more interesting than I think some of the current presidents of the world.
Oh
So
my God, that's a hell of a choice. I was going to say that to me it's way too close to where we are right now. We're not going to get political, but that kind of hits way too close to where we are right now, except with like the intelligence level cracked up several degrees. But
yes.
that's a fascinating choice. While our listeners have their nightmares about that tonight, my choice, I would say, is going to be a somewhat more conventional one. I'm going to put Tors from Vinland Saga, who was such a great leader. Even the descendant of King Arthur and egomaniac Askeladd himself asked him to take over his group because it was so obvious that Tors was a great leader of men. And what I like about Tors is that uh, he took what was his own greatest strength, which was his physical prowess, and then he used that to sort of realize how limiting it was and outgrow it. And my backup pick is kind of in the same thing. It would have been Musashi from Vagabond, although that's not an anime. Curse you. But because he's another person who was so strong that he used his own strength to realize that it was limiting him as a person and that he had to grow beyond it. And I think that's something that both of them have in common. And I think that's a great quality to be a leader. So there you go.
So,
Also,
so you
Chagam
wouldn't?
from Seigi Seru no Morbidu would be a good choice too. Yes, go ahead.
Would you not vote for Canute?
I don't know Canute. Well, I didn't read. I don't read the manga. I haven't read the manga ahead of where the anime is, and I wouldn't vote for Canute where he is right now.
Sure.
I wouldn't. I'd certainly vote for him before Yagami fucking Light, but I wouldn't vote. I wouldn't. I wouldn't vote for Canute based on where he is right now, only because I don't know him well enough. I don't know him well enough yet. Yeah, I kind of get where he's going, but I want to see where that is a little more detailed before I would give him the nod.
So you don't want to see the world burn. Okay, I get you. I get you. A backup choice would be Griffiths from Berserk, and all the Berserk fans are gonna hate me equally as much. That's as bad of a choice as Light, by the way. But I think it would be an interesting one. And if we're in fictional scenarios, why not go for the entertainment factor?
Well, there you go. Yeah, yeah. It's all hypothetical, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so there you go, listeners. Unfortunately for you, you don't have any of those choices on the ballot if you live in the United States. But while we won't get political. I will say this: vote, because that's the right thing to do. Vote like your life depends on it, because it probably does. And Setsuken, if you'll indulge me here, I also want to talk a little bit about some of our listener feedback, as I know we like to do. And we talked, as you know, about you mentioned, I think it was your question last week, was what non-anime properties would we like to see turned into anime? And one of the LIA readers, Steve, who was listening to the podcast, said something that could be fantastic as an anime, and the greatest American fantasy novel, Little Big, by John Crowley. And he says his earlier novel, Engine Summer, would also work well. So there you go. Do you know these novels, Setsuken? Because I don't know them.
I have not read them, but thank you, Steve. They're on my list because I've actually been going back, getting back into my reading of fantasy novels. So I'll get it. I was going to start the Wheel of Time, but I might take a look at these because the Wheel of Time is a bit of an undertaking to read.
It
So
is.
we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, for sure. And I believe it was Glare Stare from YouTube that asked the question, which is a good question.
Oh yes, that's right. You're right. Sorry. So credit to you, Glairster. No credit to you, Setsuken. Okay,
Wayne.
and Steve, thank you very much for that comment. And again, I'm going to try to look into these too. I want to get more back into reading fantasy and sci-fi. I haven't been reading novels as much as I used to, and that was my lifeblood when I was younger. Was reading fantasy sci-fi novels. So I don't know these series though. They passed completely under my radar. Little Big was written, I think, all the way back like in the early '80s. So that's
Oh,
that's
wow.
that's an older novel for sure. And I also want to, in the feedback section, we may be hearing from these folks again later in the show, but just to briefly mention Blastix and Blue Blue, also from LIA, who gave us some great feedback on the topic of the week last week of the question of ownership, which was I have to say, turns out to have been a really, I think, popular topic with our listeners, and we've gotten, uh, you know, indications that this struck a nerve with a lot of people. And we got some very long feedback. And I would actually direct you to go to the post on my site where some of these comments are quite detailed, and there's some back and forth on this. I don't want to rehash a topic of the week from last week this week, but I want to thank Blastix and Blue Blue for their very thoughtful and detailed comments on that topic, and just kind of generally getting into the idea of uh, ownership. And Setsukin, I think my takeaway, more than agreeing or disagreeing with either of these, Blastrix or Blue Blue, is a lot of the question of ownership comes down to how you define the terms. That's my big takeaway from this, and that's why, even though it's a fascinating topic to discuss, it's kind of hard to come to anything that you would call a real conclusion about it, because your conclusion depends on how you define the terms.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't want to get into the topic either because we might in a future episode. But I really enjoyed the different perspectives, and I have to say I always appreciate when people take the time to write long comments. That's how I started as well on discussion forums, and then I think Flare Knight, the way we met, and he works for our website now. But the way we met was he would be really good at commenting. So it's always really appreciated, and honestly, it gets us really jazzed. I was really excited to see that stuff. So thank you, and I hope to see more of you do that. And if you can, give us a comment or some kind of indication in maybe the YouTube area or on Twitter or whatever. And a question I have for our people, since they seem to like the topic, as you mentioned. I think we looked at the analytics, and this was one of the most popular
Yes.
episodes. Why? Because I
Hmm.
think all the topics we've done have been really interesting and really good. But what was it about this topic or the title or whatever that intrigued you? Because we definitely want to do that as much as possible and continue to serve you in the best way.
Absolutely. Great shout. Okay. So thank you very much, guys, and keep that feedback coming. We really appreciate it. This works best if it's a conversation, rather, and not even between the two of us, but a conversation between the two of us and you guys. That's how it really works well. So there you go. And now, with that, I think we can move on to the meat of the podcast and our first big segment.
What we're watching.
Okay, anime friends. This is a special episode of what we're watching this week because, of course, this is our first Setsuken. This is our first what we're watching when we're actually watching a new season since we rebooted. So this is kind of a big week. And as I noted before, we could talk about every show we're watching. I mean, that it's a new anime season. I think we're both watching a great deal of shows, but we're going to try to limit ourselves to a few shows each, and then stuff that we don't talk about this week we'll talk about next week. And if there is a new season show that you want us to talk about that you didn't hear us talk about, by all means, leave that as a comment or question, and we'll try to get to it next week. It may be that something that we were already planning to talk about in the next episode or whatever, but there's no harm in letting us know if there's something specifically you'd like us to comment on that you haven't heard us comment on. So let's start with something off the new schedule or something continuing if you want. But Setsuken, I'll let you go first. What's your first show to talk about this week?
Sure. So I got a little story for you here.
Okay.
Remember all my praise of ReZero and how I love that show and everything about it?
How could I forget?
So the writer for that show and that franchise is the one. He has an anime series this season, and I think I read it on your blog or somebody else's blog. But a lot of people were saying that the first episode was really good, and if you know ReZero, it's all about deconstructing tropes in isekai. So I was expecting this show to be really good as well. It's called Senyoku no Sigurdifa or Drifa. I can't even say it, but I watched the show. It was a 45-minute premiere, and man, was it bad.
Oh, really?
Not even a little bad. It was terrible. It felt like so it was basically, this is what happens, Guardian Enzo, when you throw the kitchen sink at trying to be popular. It's cute girls doing cute things. The cute girls are pilots, and they're fighting against pillars that are, and there's like, there's Odin, there's Ragnarok, there's all that mythology stuff as well. So it's just, and I watched it for 45 minutes because I thought, this is the ReZero guy, and people have been saying the episode is really good. And the twist at the end was that the show played it completely straight. So I forced myself to watch 45 minutes of cute girls doing cute things and being pilots. And by the end, the big twist was that it was just a standard cute girls doing cute things show. So really generic, really bad. I actually got my brother to watch it too. So for people who really love ReZero and love how original it is, don't watch this garbage. Just no. So that was my first show.
Well, I will say it's scoring a massive 6.6 on my anime list, which if you follow my anime list aggregator scores, that's pretty low. So it was not universally received by the 1,712 users that have so far reviewed it. It was not particularly well received by them. Um, I didn't watch it, to be honest with you, because it didn't look interesting to me. I kind of heard vaguely that it was the ReZero person that was behind it, but it just kind of looked generic. I will say before I move on to my show, without giving you the opportunity to, like a debate moderator should have, I will cut off your microphone. But maybe one of the upshots from this is ReZero isn't as good as you think it is, but that's okay. We won't go there. We won't go there. I didn't watch this show though, so I can't comment specifically on this one. I just will say ReZero is way higher on my anime list than this show. So viewers agree with you. They agree with you.
Yes, I think so. And I think so. The funny thing is, I did ask myself that question after watching this show. And I just think this was a completely different genre and a completely different audience. And the audience that watches cute girls doing cute things is not an audience I'm a part of. So give me your first show.
Yu Koku no Moriarty, which was one of my it was really my only legitimate sleeper for the season, because my sleeper category for me is a show. It has to be obviously a show that I think has a lot of potential, but it can't be like, I couldn't call Golden Kamuy 3 a sleeper, right? It has to be a show that it's at least far enough under the radar that most people are missing it. And I think Yukoku kind of borderline qualified in that category. It wasn't getting a ton of attention. It has a good staff, an interesting background. The idea here with this series is, as we've talked about, I think briefly on our show, and certainly I've talked about ad nauseum on my blog. uh, Sherlock Holmes is a absolute obsession with anime in the last 5 years. It's really kind of followed in the footsteps of Oda Nobunaga as a historical figure, and he's not even a real one in this case. That anime is just obsessed with recasting and reshaping and putting out of context. So the idea with this one is the focus is on Moriarty, which is fairly novel, not totally new, but it's fairly new. But what they've done, and Holmes will be in this series at some point, by the way, but he's not in the premiere. But they've cast Moriarty as not a villain, but kind of an anti hero who is in Victorian London, and which is sort of in many ways the epitome of the apex of the British class system at its most rigid. And he's an agitator. He calls himself a crime investigator, not notably not a detective. And but what he's really about is he wants to shake up the social order, and Lord knows there are echoes through time. We could talk about this story, but it's very interesting. Subversive stories don't have a lot of foothold in Japanese popular entertainment, including anime. About the only other anime I can think of in recent years that's really subversive is Concrete Revolution. And I think, and I to a certain extent, Eureka Seven AO is subversive too. Although people were so caught up in how it didn't live up to their expectations for being a clone of the first one that they didn't really pick up on that. But that's another podcast or series of podcasts. Um, so Yukiko no Moriarty, very good show. In my opinion, a good cast, well written, very interesting. Have not read the manga, but it's well regarded, and that is based on a novel. Actually, the manga is. No, it isn't. It's so. But it's also very interesting and different in that it's taking on some very interesting. People think classism is not a thing in Japan. Believe me, classism is a thing in Japan, much more so than the Japanese are willing to admit. So I'm going to be very interested in seeing where the series goes with this. We also got a bit of news on it this week, just incidentally, that it's going to be a two-core series, but they're going to be split core, with the second core airing in spring. So we got 24 episodes of this to look forward to as well.
Yes, this show was definitely quite the premiere. I loved it a lot, actually, and I think for some of the reasons you mentioned, um, the big thing for me was the anti-hero angle for sure, and then the acknowledgement. I was actually thinking we wouldn't hear about Sherlock Holmes at all in this series, and maybe it would be set before Sherlock Holmes came into the picture. But there's allusions to the fact that he's going to be part of the story, and the whole enterprise, the whole angle. I think it was a phenomenal show, and I think for me it exceeded my expectations of what I was expecting from it. I thought it would be a decent show. It would, but it was very entertaining to watch, and I definitely enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah, and let me also say it was also it very nice to look at too. It was very well animated. It was a very nicely done show. I mean, which is not shocking considering the studio behind it. But then you look at Noblesse. We won't talk about Noblesse this week, but that was a production IG show, which normally you think production IG that's going to be a really great looking show. I thought the premiere was pretty decent, but the visuals I thought were kind of blah, especially compared to their own Noblesse OBA from a few years ago. But we can talk about that later. Anyway, Coco, we both liked it. A lot of potential here. I think we both agree. What's your second show?
So my second show was Ikebukuro West Park, which I think we both watched, and I think we had very different reactions to it. I had the lowest of low expectations for this show, and the reason for that was because it reminded me a lot of Durarara, and I know that this series came out and this franchise as a whole existed way before Durarara did, but it had a lot of the same vibes and it's set in the same location in Japan. But I was pleasantly surprised. I actually liked it quite a bit. I don't think it's revolutionary or this big thing, But it was a nice, notable little series, and I liked the vibe of Ikebukuro and the whole G Boys gangster thing that was going on, and the main character was charming enough. So, as an introductory episode, it sold me on the world and some of the characters. So, I'm curious to see more about it, and I'm a lot more positive on it than I expected.
Interesting, because I'm a lot more negative on it than I expected. I had pretty high expectations for Ikebukuro Westgate Park. It was maybe my third or fourth, probably my fourth series after Golden Kamui, Tonikaku Kawaii, and Haiku. Two of which, of course, I knew exactly what I was going to get, and Tony Kaku, even really having read some of the manga. But I even probably would have said I had it ranked slightly above Yukoku no Moriarty, although those were among the original shows, probably my top two picks of the season. Well, Tony Kaku is original too, but not to me. Um, but I thought the premiere was. I thank you for pointing out that it's not ripping off Durarara. It's total. It out a it was out way before Durarara was. If I have to see one more comment though about how it rips off Durarara, I'm gonna bust a blood vessel. But
And it doesn't at all.
it doesn't at all, because it was out first, and B, Durarara doesn't rip off IWGP. They're even though they're both set in Ikebukuro, they're really different in most respects.
Yes.
Um, but I thought it was. Now, again, the background in this is it was a hugely successful Japanese drama in 2000. It was only one season, but it was like a big hit. It was a water cooler show. It was hip. I compare it to something like 21 Jump Street in America, where it was like a show that was really popular with 20 somethings, and it was the people were talking about it at work, they were talking about it at school. It was one of those kind of shows. I have no idea if that original TV drama was good. I just know it was super popular. But this first episode was so 90s, it needed in a bad way to me. The only thing was missing was Nancy Reagan popping up saying, just say no. To me, the whole drug thing, it was preachy, it was broad, it was like, it was really clumsy exposition. It was just very ham fisted, heavy handed, obvious. I kept waiting. The way you felt about Safe Radio, where you kept expecting, waiting for the twist, and the twist was that there was no twist. That's kind of how I felt about IWGP. That the twist was that there was no twist. They were playing this straight, and to me, it was really kind of lame. It was like, oh, this is the whole thing was like, oh, drugs are bad. Very South Park. Drugs are bad. Vigilanteism is good. That was kind of the whole first episode, and I don't need to have that preached to me by an anime. I mean, if you're gonna do it in a more elegant and persuasive way. If it sounds like I mean, I really, honestly, I disliked it. I flat out disliked it. But I know this has a really good staff, and I know, well, a pretty good staff. It has a really really interesting history with all the attached manga and the original drama series, and it's an important thing in Japanese pop culture history. So I will give this show a lot of rope to hang itself. I'm not going to drop it after one or two episodes, but I did not like the premiere. I have to say, I didn't like it. It did not work for me.
Yeah, and that's fair. I think it's definitely a show that it's an acquired taste. I don't see this as a show that is going to appeal to everyone and be this amazing hit and all this stuff. But I like the vibe of it, and the vibe is, I think, what sold me on it more so than the plot, because I think the plot was pretty standard and pretty generic. But I mean, in some ways, it felt like a live action show, and a very simple serial one. So I see where you're coming from. I just had such low expectations that I think it 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 being even half decent was a step up. But I'm also like a sucker for these kinds of stories, and I mean, I agree with the fact that drugs are bad. So there's the preachiness that you were talking about that didn't really bother me. But again, this is different people, different tastes.
And listen, I think for the most part, we don't want to get into a whole thing on drugs here. I agree with, generally speaking and broadly speaking, drugs are bad. I also believe that there are ways you can approach controlling drug use uh, differently than the way Japan and the United States do that makes sense
Oh, totally,
from a public
totally.
health standpoint. But that's another conversation. The problem with me is moralism from the point of view of storytelling is almost never a good angle, even if I agree with what they're preaching. I don't think it works narratively, at least for me. And ironically, we may have come at this from a very different angle, which may be part of the problem. Is my expectations may have been too high, and that may be why
Yes.
I was disappointed in it. But we'll see. Like I said, I'm not dropping it. We'll see where we go from here. My second show on my list is Golden Kamui season 3, which, you know, there I knew what I was getting from Golden Kamui. There was no surprises here, but just want to say, yes, it was the best premiere of the season, as you would have expected it to be. It was awesome. It's, you know, I love Golden Kamui because there's nothing in the world. I used to go to Grateful Dead concerts back in the day, and there was a great saying with the Dead was, "There's nothing in the world like a Grateful Dead concert," and that's kind of how I feel about Golden Kamui. There's nothing in anime like Golden Kamui. It's a unique entity. It's like I described it in my first impressions post as if Dr. Zhivago and Monty Python's Flying Circus had a kid. That's kind of what Golden Kamui is. It has this grand sweeping epic historical epic element, and there's a lot of social commentary. It takes on the third rail issue in Japan of the treatment of the Ainu. Every major industrial power seems to have their own oppressed uh, native people, and with Japan, it's the Ainu. And Japan and Russia both they fought each other, but they have this in common: they both tried to wipe out Ainu culture. But yet, it also is incredibly funny, and it has the humor is so lowbrow in much the same way that Monty Python could be incredibly smart and also be incredibly broad and lowbrow humor and just make you laugh equally both ways. That's kind of the way the humor in Golden Kamui works. It uses dumb puns and slapstick and visual gags. It's a great experience. I love Golden Kamui, and the Noda Sensei writes every character, no matter how minor their role. Every character in Golden Kamui is written as if they're the protagonist of their own series, which I think is one of the reasons, one of the secrets of its success. It's if you're on the fence about continuing with Golden Kamui, I don't know how you would be after 2 seasons. You'd be like an undecided voter in the presidential election. How could you be undecided at this point? You kind of have to pick one, don't you? At this stage, you kind of know what you're getting. But with Golden Kamui, if somehow, some way you were undecided, uh, you can you can confidently move forward. It's still great.
Yes, I haven't seen it yet. It's on my list. I don't know if I'm going to wait for it to pile up a little bit and watch it in chunks. How was the cliffhangerness of this season? Because last season, I watched the entire second half of the first season, or I think season two, whatever you want to call it, in one go. And I'm
Mm.
wondering if I should do that again because I enjoyed that way of experiencing it a lot.
I don't know. I don't have anything to compare it to. I've only ever watched it on an ongoing basis. I mean, there are cliffhangers at the end of the season, but they've done that with every season. And you know, Golden Kamui is a series with an ongoing, overarching plot, and I suspect that that plot is not going to be resolved until the very end of the series. So you're going to get things that aren't answered every episode. So if you know, every episode will have unanswered questions leading into the next one. So if you want to avoid that, I think watching them all in one swell swoop would be the way to do it.
All right, sounds perfect.
Okay, next up for you.
Um, Actually, I'm gonna cut it out at this point because I think we went fairly long on the other series, and I think the third series I was gonna mention isn't that special, so I'll just
Okay.
save it for next week.
Okay. Well, mine is going to be a fairly brief one. It's going to be the new Inuyasha series, Hanyo, the half demon princess. So you have not watched the premiere yet, correct?
Correct, and have no
Okay.
intention of. Should I?
Well, here's the thing, and this is why I thought it was at least worth briefly mentioning is as we talked about in one of our in our season preview podcast, both of us have a lot of trepidation about this for largely overlapping reasons. I think it's fair to say. But what they did was see, here's the thing. The premiere was really good. The problem is it tells us nothing about what the rest of the show is going to be like. Why? Because they chose in the premiere to adapt Rumiko Takahashi's epilogue chapter from, I think, 2015 or 2016. So the premiere basically was all of the classic characters, and it was written by Rumiko. The new season is going to be mostly about new characters, and it's not written by Rumiko. So while the first episode was quite good, it was, in fact, it was, I mean, it wasn't spectacular. It was a fairly standard yokai battle chapter from Inuyasha, of which Lord knows there were many, but it was nice to get together because, for me, and I'm sure for you and for a lot of our listeners, Inuyasha, though, that cast is like family for us. Really, that's how it feels like to see all those people, be they yokai, half yokai, or humans again. And it was great. It was great to hang out with Sango and Miroku. Although Miroku, there's a tragedy there. We lost the Seiyu, who was also the Seiyu for Tanda in Seiru no Moribito, died far too young. Another story. So we was replaced, and a good Seiyu replacing him. And it's nobody's fault. It just was a reminder of how tragic it was that he died at so young. But Inuyasha, Kohaku, everyone was there. Sesshomaru, almost everyone was there. This is the chapter Rumiko wrote. She included almost everyone. I won't say everyone because one character is not there, but I don't want to say who it was. So it was a good premiere because it was Rumiko, and it was because the characters we love. Now we have a series, 2 core series, I believe it was announced, who are new characters mostly, written by people whose resumes are not impressive, with minimal to no impact from Rumiko creatively, and a premise which looks suspiciously like something being updated in order to conform with the trends. So my expectations are unfortunately no higher than they were, even though I liked the premiere quite a bit. I think the reason I liked it is because it wasn't the premiere I thought we were going to get. We actually got the last chunk of the old series rather than the first chunk of the new one.
Yeah, that makes sense. For me, like we mentioned once before, the final chapter really soured me on the franchise, and so I know you mentioned that it was like meeting a bunch of old friends and stuff like that, and I don't know if I would feel the same way, even if it was like a epilogue chapter to the original story. But I'll be curious to see how you feel about it once a couple of episodes go by and you've seen the new cast and the new people. So
Yeah.
we'll check back in with you and we'll
Yeah.
hear what's going on.
Yeah, I'm not expecting to fall in love, let's put it that way, but I hope I'm wrong. We'll see. Anyway, so that's what we're watching, and stay tuned. Next week's episode again will be, I think, mostly new shows, so it'll be another fun segment. And with that, we get ready to move on to most people's favorite chunk of the show.
The anime.
And now it's time for all the news that's fit to discuss, because, of course, nobody prints news anymore. At least if they do, nobody reads it. Because you get newsprint on all of your fingers, and, who needs that with the internet? So let's talk a little bit about this week's anime news. And let's start, of course, with the Oricon rankings. And I want to briefly, as we get into the Oricon rankings, we don't normally talk about the YouTube Oricon rankings, but Oricon ranks the YouTube rankings, the top YouTube videos every week in Japan. And because this is an update of a story we discussed, I just wanted to point out that Gotcha by Bump of Chicken with Matsumoto Rie's incredible video is number 4 on the Japanese YouTube chart this week with 4,234,665 views. And it's the only new entry in the top 10. So congratulations and well deserved to Gotcha. We already talked about why that was so great. So there you go.
Will
Let's.
it dethrone Open Gangnam Style though?
Oh, I don't even. How many views did that get? I don't even want to know.
A lot, a
A
lot.
lot.
It was
I
a
don't know
joke.
how many it got in Japan, but I would imagine it was probably a lot. So let's jump to the standard, kind of what I would call our standard list, which is the weekly comic rankings we'll start with. And surprise, surprise, the top 2 are The new two volumes of the final volume of Kimetsu no Yaiba 22, which between them sold over 2 million copies in the first week, which is an astonishing number. Again, with all apologies to One Piece, wow, that's a huge number. Uh,
Yes, I have. You seen that picture, that GIF of Scrooge McDuck jumping into
of
the
course.
swimming pool of
Yeah, yeah,
money?
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
what I that's what I think of when I hear this.
I just hope that Gotoge Sensei, because relatively new mangaka, got a good deal. Because when Oda sells 1 million copies at this point, he makes a ton. But he's got a better contract. He's been doing this for a long time. Promise Neverland at number 3, volume 20. Jujutsu Kaisen, which I suspect again is getting a bump, is number 4. Burn the Witch, which I know will have gotten a bump from the release of the film there, number 5. One Piece is at number 6, although that's the second week, so that's not too shocking. Kingdom, Black Clover, Another World Tavern Nobu is at number 11. That's got to be an adaptation of a light novel, I assume. And Seraph of the End, volume 22, came in at number 10. Interesting.
Ooh, is that still going on?
I guess so. It's volume 10. I
Wow.
haven't heard that, or volume 22, I should say. Haven't heard that one for a while. Buy comic work next, which is the all volumes of any given franchise. Again, number 1 is, you would guess correctly, is Kimetsu no Yaiba. They don't give numbers on this Oricon, but it's probably more than every other franchise on the list combined. Promise Neverland number 2, Jujutsu Kaisen number 3, and now I can pretty much say with certainty number 3 on the franchise list. It is getting a nice bump for sure. Kingdom, which we may be discussing later, number 4. One Piece number 5, Haiku number 6, Fire Force number 7, Attack on Titan number 8. That will get a bump when the final season emerges, and Spy X Family number 9, and Burn the Witch, nice bump there, number 10. Okay. Let's look at anime Blu-ray. And if you have any comments on any of these, by the way, Setsuken, please feel free to jump in anytime. Otherwise, I'll plow through. Any thoughts on the manga ones?
Nope, just really happy with the whole list as usual.
Okay, weekly anime Blu-ray. Princess Connect Redrive, Volume 3 is number 1. Kaguya Wants to Be Confessed To. That's number 2. Continues to be very popular. Series whose popularity, I don't dislike it, but it mystifies me a little bit as to why that's so popular, but there you go. That raising one again, that's number 3. Mahoka. Is this Mahoka? Let's see. Some of these Google translations. Incompatible person of Demon King Academy, the founder of the strongest Demon King in history, reincarnated and attends the School of Descendants, Volume 1.
Yeah, that's the misfit of a Demon King.
The one you said was so bad it was funny because it was sort of intentionally bad.
Yep, yep.
Okay, yeah, Yahari came in at number 5. Theatrical version Made in Abyss has been on the list now ever since it came out. Number 6, the limited edition version. Token Ranbu Hanamaru Blu-ray box. Wow, Token Ranbu comes back from the beyond at number 7. I didn't even realize there was a new box set coming out on that. Higurashi When They Cry Complete BD box, maybe getting a little bump from the new series there, number 8. Anna and the Snow King, number 9. Darwin's Game 6, number 10. Not
Ugh.
one I realized was that popular, but there you go.
Apparently the manga's really good,
Okay,
but the anime was
not good. It was kind of not good. Okay. Pet 2 is the number 1 DVD. As usual, Western animation making a bigger splash on the DVD side. One Piece Log Collection Wedding, we've seen that before, is number 2. Anna and the Snow Queen, number 3. The Token Ranbu box, again, not shocking here, is higher on the DVD list. It does have more women in the audience than men. That's kind of the expected turn. That's number 4. The Misfit of Demon King Academy is Magic Academy is number 5. Kaguya number 6. How to Raise Her number 7. Totoro, which is to the DVD rankings what Dark Side of the Moon is to the Billboard album rankings, stays in at number 8. Grand Blue Fantasy number 9, Volume 7, Season 2, and Paw Patrol Season 2 comes in at number 10. There you go. Those are the Oricon rankings for this week. And congratulations to Gotcha for being number 4 on the YouTube list. Let's talk about some rumors on the news side. We have one story here from Anime Corner by Karol Koyomi. And I know you're a fan of this, so this is an interesting one. The mangaka Amano Akira of Katekyo Hitman Reborn, which was a pretty big weekly Shonen Jump series for a long time, has tweeted out with a platypus, which I guess is his personal logo. But he's tweeted out he's going to come out with some kind of an announcement on the 11th, which is tomorrow Japanese time. By the time our podcast comes out, we'll know what this is actually. And we don't know what this announcement is. And I think some fans are hoping it's going to be something with the Reborn franchise, but it could be a new series. What are your thoughts on this one, Setsuken?
Yeah, I'm excited. I hope it is a Reborn series, because what happened to... Did you ever watch Hitman Reborn?
I read a bit of the manga and I watched maybe 12, 15 episodes of the anime. Never ended up liking it as much as I thought I was going to somehow. I didn't dislike it, but I just kind of lost interest.
Yeah, it got better with time in each arc, but then the last arc happened, the future arc as it's known, and that one, it started to sag a little bit in quality, and then it was just canceled. First the anime got canceled, and then the manga just abruptly ended as well. So fans have always been hopeful that either it gets redone or remade or something like that, but I think my suspicion is, now I think about it, is probably that he's making a new manga, because he's been kind of radio silent for quite a while. So
yeah, it's been a few years since the manga ended, isn't it? So yeah, that'll be interesting to see. We'll stay tuned for that. Like I say, by the time this podcast hits the airwaves, we may know, in fact, what that announcement is. We probably will.
yes.
Okay. Sorry, go
One
ahead.
quick thing.
Mm-hmm.
One quick thing. I will say I like the fact that more mangaka and more directors are leveraging Twitter to kind of announce things. It's kind of cool to not have to see everything through a PR funnel and stuff like that. So I think that was one of the things, especially thinking of last week in our
Yeah,
discussion,
feedback.
that there is more of a there's a more direct communication line. And Mashima's really good at this too. So I think this will do wonders for the mangaka, both in Japan and in the West as well.
And one thing that we're seeing is some of our news stories are based off of off of tweets. That has happened a few times and will continue to happen. So Twitter is definitely a part of the anime landscape now. There's no question about it. A lot of creators use it. And again, I think it's good. And some of them are good enough at English that they will communicate with English comments too. So something to keep in mind. Let's move on to the section of the news where we talk about series announcements. We want to talk about a new Natsume Yujincho film. I'm a big fan of this franchise. And assuming we'll probably get a new season at some point, as we always seem to.
Yes.
And the manga is ongoing and remains very popular. But there will be a new Natsume Yujincho film on January 16th. Hisako Kanemoto, who I think of as Ika Musume mainly, but she's a very, very successful seiyuu. She will be playing a forest spirit, the main yokai guest appearance in this one. This was called Natsume Yujincho Ishi Okoshi to Ayakashi Raihosha, the Waking Rock and the Strange Visitor. And my normal comment with any new Natsume Yujincho announcement is needs more Kogetsune. We haven't seen enough Kogetsune. We want more Kogetsune, but I'd have no indication that we're going to get more Kogetsune. Anyway, but I love Natsume, so more coming. They always do a great job, whether they're original or... And one thing I will say about Natsume Yujincho is it's been very lucky. The original anime material for this series has been far, far above how good anime original material usually is.
Yes. And I wasn't originally going to talk about this series, but one thing I did want to say is I like Natsume a lot. It's like comfort food for me, but I also think it's been going a bit too long and not addressing some of the larger mysteries of the franchise. So in some ways, I'd almost like it to start heading towards a conclusion. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that. Yeah, I would. I think it kind of depends on whether you think of it as a slice of life or as a drama, because there is an ongoing plot, but so much of what the staple of it is basically slice of life stuff, which really could go on effectively forever if she wanted. So yeah, but I agree with you. I've noted this actually. It's funny you mentioned it because I've mentioned that in the past when the last season was running, that a couple of my episodic posts, I was like, I'm kind of ready for her to start ramping up towards the finale because I kind of want to get resolution to some of these ongoing things now. So yes, I do agree with you with that. But that said, as long as there's more, I still love it. I mean, it's just like you said, it's comfort food. I kind of think of this and Mushishi as yin and yang series, two sides of the same coin. For me, in my mindset, that where Mushishi, which is better on the whole, don't get me wrong, but they're both great. But Mushishi is kind of cool emotionally, and Natsume is warm. But
Yes.
they're two sides of the same sort of aesthetic palette for me. So more Natsume always a good thing. More Nyanko Sensei always a good thing. Another one, no surprises here, just kind of bookkeeping, but important to note. As expected by me, the next season of Boku no Hero Academia season 5 is coming out in spring of 2021. No episode count yet, but we're going to guess probably two cores again, would seem most likely, but nothing official. And should be interesting. This is moving into a part of the manga which has been somewhat divisive among the readership. I think it's fair to say. So it'll be interesting to see how how the viewership, new viewers respond. It'll also be interesting to see, now that there is no new BNHA movie coming out, as far as we know, whether the main cast, the main staff, which largely took season 4 off to work on the most recent film, whether they come back and we get back to the more traditional BNHA look from the first 3 seasons, or whether we continue with the season 4 cast, which was a little more stylized, I would think. Fair to say. Another one I know we're both interested in, there was finally an announcement, hallelujah, on Kingdom season 3, which is in fact going to return in spring of 2021. So basically, it took a year off after the COVID thing. I'm sure they would have been ready to come back sooner. Let's talk about, I pulled this story off of the main Kingdom anime website, where they actually did release an English announcement. TV animation Kingdom third series will resume broadcasting in the spring of 2021. We will continue to work diligently while giving maximum consideration to preventing the spread of infection by the cast and staff. Please wait a while. So good for them. We got an announcement. It's a long way to wait. And I suspect this would have come back sooner if it not for the fact that there's a time slot issue. And we've talked about how time slot issues are a factor in some of these delays. And the new season of Attack on Titan is starting in November, and it's got to run its course. And so once that's done, presumably that's when Kingdom will come back. And what we can infer from this about the length of the last season of Attack on Titan, I don't know if we can say. Will it run from November straight through to spring? We don't know when in spring Kingdom is coming back either. They didn't give us a date. So that could be March. It could be May. We don't know. So interesting, interesting implications for Attack on Titan, but I'm more concerned with Kingdom, honestly, because it's a better show. I'm just glad it's coming back.
Yes, what a relief, man. Because I think I was, everybody in my family, so my brother, my wife, they were both very worried about this series. And I was like, don't worry, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. And I think I even said that to you, right? Because you were worried about it getting just flat out canceled.
I was worried. Yeah, I was worried.
Yeah, so I was happy. I just hope that we get more of it because it did seem like the third season, just from the pacing and all that stuff, was a core. So I don't know if it'll be two cores or if there's going to be more successive seasons. Because I hope this doesn't dampen the momentum even more so than the horrible first part of the first season with the bad CGI. But this is exciting, man, and it's really good. And I think it got confirmed for April, didn't it?
Oh, did it? I only heard spring is what I heard. So
Don't quote me on that one, but
okay.
I think I remember reading April, but I might be totally off base. There's a lot of other stuff coming in April that got confirmed.
Yeah, it did. And I don't think it's going to be one core. I never thought it was going to be one core. It doesn't make any sense to bother making a Kingdom season that's a single core because there's so much manga. I'm shocked if it's less than two, and I still expect it to be three, but we'll see.
If it's three, I will be happy. I will be so happy. I'll fly to Japan and hug you.
Okay.
If
The
that's
first
true.
two seasons were three cores. The reason this keeps getting anime is because the manga is incredibly popular. So that hasn't changed. The manga remains incredibly popular, and that's why I'm not too worried about it losing momentum. Another announcement, and this one is really interesting. This one I pulled off of. Bleeding Cool by Ray Fluke at Bleeding Cool. No, yes, it's Godzilla is getting a new anime. The last Godzilla anime, but it's getting a new anime. This one is from Bones. That's where it gets exciting. And not only is it from Bones, but it's from Bones and Orange, which is where it's really interesting because we've not really seen Bones in this kind of a collaboration with a CGI studio before. So Maya's and Bones is the best probably of the TV CGI studios. Their work on Beastars was tremendous. And also the Hoseki series, which was not a great love of mine, but it did look good for a CGI show. So I'm assuming that Orange is going to do the CGI portion with Godzilla himself, and Bones will do the character animation, and that could potentially work really, really good. This is going to be a Netflix, so I believe the implication from what I've heard is that Netflix is going to be releasing this worldwide simultaneously rather than doing a Japan first. But I don't think that's been officially confirmed yet. But it is coming next year. We don't know when next year, but it is coming next year. And the director is Atsushi Takahashi, who is not a great name in Bones direction, most well known for doing the 2017 Dorairan movie. But you know, Bones generally doesn't do anything half-assed. So if they're involved in this, I expect it to look pretty good. And there's even a well-known Studio Ghibli director, Eiji Yamamori, who's going to be working on this show, who's going to be doing the monster design. So it's called Godzilla Singular Point, and we don't know too much about the plot at this stage. But hey, a new Godzilla by Bones and Orange, that's interesting.
Yes, it's a very interesting. Did you ever watch the Netflix movies?
Yeah, the first one didn't make me want to watch the second.
Yeah, that's why I'm very confused because I think they tapered off. I think I watched the first two and I just never gotten around to watching the third one. But it was not a Godzilla story as much as like a sci-fi thing. So it's interesting. It's interesting that Netflix it did well. It did pretty good, but it's not a sequel. I think to the original because
No,
the
no.
original staff isn't working on this from the three movies. So I wonder if those did well or the first one did really well and they're taking another crack at it. That's why I'm kind of curious about it because Godzilla's a big thing. I think they're also making a movie, or sorry, Godzilla, as they say in the Japanese version. But
Yeah, it's a big thing for sure worldwide, but especially here. No, this is definitely not a sequel to those. This is another reimagining of the Godzilla mythos, and that's why we've got new studios involved with it and new staff. So it'll be, the range of potential outcomes here is everything from great to awful. But hey, it's interesting. It's Bones and Orange working on Godzilla. So I also want to offer a quick update of a story we talked about last week, which was uh, the whole tweet with Yabuta Shuhei tweeting out the teaser for a potential Gold Vinland Saga season 2, Golden Kamui. That was a Freudian slip. But he also tweeted out this week, and again, it's our friend Twitter making news. He tweeted out this week that he was working on the CGI for the new season of Attack on Titan, even though that's flipped over to Mappa. And he said he was the only person from the original CGI staff who's going to be working on the final AOT season. So again, we have AOT with its tendrils in another news story for another show. It casts a big shadow. But what's interesting here to me is he mentioned that he's also working on his own show. Uh, so this is not going to be his main focus. But he doesn't tell us what show that is. So make of that what you will. Is there any particular show we're hoping he's referring to there? Are you hoping he's referring to any specific show, Setsuken?
Obviously, it's Vinland Saga, but I think it's interesting that he's splitting his time like that. I guess Shingeki is pretty precious to him that he wants to still be involved in that. And I think it will kind of split his time between his series and the other one. So I think it's very interesting that he's doing this.
Well, I mean, and yeah, we see if you were directors directing two shows at the same time is not unheard of, but it is very rare. Like Watanabe directed Major Second and Koino Ameigari on the same season, but I'm sure the production schedules were staggered. But I get the impression that he's definitely not in charge of the CGI for Attack on Titan this time. He's just involved in it. And his priority is going to be his own show. I am not totally confident that it's Vinland Saga he's referring to, but I certainly hope it is. You say it's obvious. To me, it's not obvious. It could be something completely different, but I hope it's Vinland Saga, because if he's working on his own show now at Wit that isn't Vinland Saga, that means if there is going to be another season of Vinland Saga, it's going to be quite a while before we see it. So we hope Yabuta Sensei, who is emerging as one of the great trolls of anime Twitter, will indeed be working on. We hope that it is Vinland Saga he's referring to.
This is before we move on. This is true, but do you think it's that much of a far fetched thing, especially because he did tweet the other tweet before?
Oh no, I don't think it's far fetched. I just don't think it's a lock. I think it absolutely could be. It's where the mind goes first, but I think it's more like 50%, 60%. I mean, it could easily be something else too.
Okay.
I don't, yeah, I'm just saying, I don't think it's a given. I don't think it's a long shot, but I don't think it's a given because we don't know. He could be working on anything. I mean, it's so, and then like I said, my feeling on Vinland is I'm not despairing, but until I see hard evidence, I'm going to be skeptical. That's just how it is. Okay. That is our new series announcements segment. Let's talk about some miscellaneous news because we did get some of that. Attack on Titan seems to be one of those shows that keeps making news, but there's another show that does, and that's Neon Genesis Evangelion, which has never stopped making news from its original airing way back at the end of the 20th century. It is, well, we'll be talking about this show more on this podcast too, I think, but the 25th anniversary of the original airing of Neon Genesis Evangelion is this Sunday, actually. So that's kind of a big deal. But the reason it's a news story is I did not even realize this, but for the very first time on Blu-ray, it's going to be available in North America. G Kids is releasing it on Blu-ray, and as well as the original two Evangelion films, which you should watch if you're a fan, but the TV ending is better for the record, in my opinion. Those are going to be available on Blu-ray and also digital downloads. So very interesting. I did not realize this was the first time. And here's a funny thing. Here's how long it's been since Evangelion. The futuristic Neon Genesis Evangelion set in 2015. So there you go. And yet I look around and I still don't see Tokyo 3. What can you say? But so I'm a bigger fan than you, but anytime Evangelion makes news, it's news. So there you go. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so the big interesting thing I remember when this was announced, the original, because it got released on Netflix a while back, and
Yes.
that's how a lot of people discovered it. But what Netflix did that was really interesting was they dubbed it with a new dub cast. And I don't watch dubs, and I don't think you watch a lot of dubs either.
Nope.
But I remember fans being really upset about it. I think one of the voice actresses, the one for Asuka, she put a heartfelt thing on Twitter saying, she wasn't even asked to come back. So I'm very curious which dub G Kids is going to use, because no matter which one they do, they're gonna piss off somebody.
Yep, they will. But the people they piss off will be dub fans. So, sorry, no, that was low. That was a low blow. If you like dubs, I think I watched the first time. I think I watched it. I think it was a dub actually. I wouldn't swear to it, but it could have been a dub. It was on. It was definitely on VHS cassette. That I got from the San Mateo Electronic Media Library in California. Whether it was dubbed or subbed, I don't absolutely remember, but I know I have seen Evangelion on dub and sub. And I actually, as dubs go, the first dub was not terrible, but the sub is the iconic version. The Japanese cast is the iconic cast. There's some Mayumi Hagashi, Ogata Megumi. It's a tremendous cast of characters of actors for that. So there you go. So always more Evangelion. Also, the other tiny
Yes.
yes, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Ano has just said also, please be patient. I'm not ready with the new movie yet. Big shocker there. But sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's what I was going to talk about. So I think we were on a similar wavelength.
Yeah.
They did announce that it was coming originally. I thought it was supposed to come this year or next year.
This
the
year.
new movie. Oh, yeah. So COVID probably threw a wrench into that. But I wonder if the... did you watch the movies, Guardian Enzo?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think they...
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, please do. Please. Dozo.
I think they jumped the shark a bit on the third one. I love the first two.
Yes.
So I'm curious if they stretch it out, because there's no way they're wrapping up everything in a fourth.
I think the plan is to wrap it in the fourth movie. That's what I've heard. And I agree with you. For the record, the third movie was a debacle creatively, narratively. The first one was fine to me. It was more just kind of like it was to me. It was like rewatching the series with improved visuals. It was nothing special, but it was fun. The second movie was really good. I liked the second movie a lot, and the third movie was a dumpster fire. So,
Yep.
My feeling has always been he keeps remaking the ending, and the original ending was the best one. And every time he remakes the ending, it gets worse. So I'm expecting the ending to be worse in this next movie, but we'll see. But I do think, as far as I know, there is no plan for a fifth movie. I think the next stage in the Evangelion development, and people will always want to make money off of it, is they'll reboot the TV series at some point. I don't think there's going to be another big screen film next. I think the next thing will be a reboot of the TV series. But that won't come for another 5 years, is my guess. Okay, so let's talk about SSSS Dyna Xenon, which is the new Trigger show, which is set in the Gridman universe. In fact, it's even subtitled Gridman Universe in the promo images. This is from our friends at Anime News Network. Aegon Lu has a story about this. So the first preview for Dyna Xenon came out. It's all of the same staff as Gridman. Gridman is by far my favorite Trigger series. It's not even close. So I just wanted to point out, for those of you that didn't realize this was out there, this is out there. It's a good preview. Really interesting character designs. So all the same staff, same core universe. No reason to suspect, or at least reason to hope, that this anime will be a worthy successor to Gridman.
Yeah, and I think Gridman is one of those shows that you and I had very different views on. I loved the first 13 episodes or so. I think the second half of the series jumped the shark a little bit. And for our listeners here, this is the hardest moment for me to not spoil something. But I will just say, without spoiling anything, the ending episode and what it ended on was one of the worst endings I've ever seen, I think. And
wow.
Because of I will say, the narrative device that they used. So that's about the only thing. But I don't know if I'll watch this. Gridman rubbed me the wrong way in a lot of ways. But you liked it a lot, so maybe I'll be convinced to see it through your impressions on it.
Okay, so only Trigger series. I liked BNA okay. I liked LWA okay, but Gridman was really the only Trigger series that I've genuinely really, really liked. And it not surprisingly, it most reminded me of a vintage Gainax show out of all the Trigger shows. So, yeah, we'll see. Last news story briefly we want to talk about. It isn't a specific news story, just so much as a bit of news is Higurashi, which we found out this week was not. Should we talk about this? Is this okay to talk about, or are we getting into spoiler territory? What do you think?
I think this is fine. It's correcting ourselves a little bit.
So there is an official title now. They changed the title of the new Higurashi series. The official title of the new Higurashi series is Higurashi no Nakukoro ni Go, and the reason is they hid the title. It was a secret. Everyone involved in it either didn't know about it or was in on the secret and managed to keep it until the second episode was released, which was pretty interesting. And so this actually is not a reboot of the original Higurashi anime. This is definitely a sequel. And it seems now the Higurashi When They Cry universe, the franchise, which is a game universe originally, is Byzantine complicated. It's I don't know by any means the ins and outs of all this, but it appears to be pulling from uh, somewhat from the Umineko series, which was the follow up to Higurashi in the When They Cry universe, and did got an anime actually, but was not terribly well received. And then also from another story, which was there was a compilation of like fan submitted stories that got compiled by the original author into a volume, and this was one of those that was called Oni Damashi. And there seems to be some elements from that in the preview video and the elements of the second episode. But the gist of it is somehow or another, this is a sequel to Higurashi, and it's incorporating seemingly elements from a couple different other places in the universe, but is coming out with something original. And according to the original author, Ryukishi07, I'm sure that's his real name on his birth certificate. Ryukishi07 has said that he is writing this, and I thought my original reaction was, why would he be writing it? And he wasn't mentioned in the original credits as being the writer. That makes no sense. You'd want to trumpet that, and now I realize, of course, it's because they were hiding it because it was all part of the secret. As one of my commenters, Anshin, pointed that out to me. Duh, that's why they didn't use his name, because it was part of the secret. So yeah, so the headline here, just for the record, is Higurashi is a sequel. It's not a reboot, it's a sequel, and fans are apoplectic, but I'm interested. I'm more interested now because it's going new places I haven't seen before. I was fine with the idea with a reboot. I didn't see the need for it. I'm more interested in seeing what a sequel looks like.
Yeah, for me, I don't see the point of a sequel either. Although I was kind of excited about the remake just because of how good it was. But I mean, this is fine. I'm surprised, and I don't see the point of it. But, because the third season wrapped up things pretty nicely. And honestly, I know you mentioned Umineko. I would be interested to see that continued because I like that show, even though it was a little bit more weird than Higurashi. But yeah, I haven't seen the second episode yet. Flare Knight over at my site told me about it. I think before he wrote the review for it. So, and then you put a post in as well. So I'll report back after I watch the second episode. But it's a bummer for me because I was getting my wife into the series, and now we can't watch we have to go back and watch the first 3 seasons, which isn't maybe a bad thing.
Well,
but
for the record, Ryukishi has said his aim for this season is for it to be something that you can enjoy even if you haven't seen earlier seasons. So he says he specifically wants this to be a season that even new viewers can understand and enjoy. So how that plays out, we don't know. The most mundane part of this story, just, but to address it, is maybe this belonged in what we're watching, but I liked the second episode just as I liked the first episode. I think the execution is very good. It has the original cast, which is fine. It's a good cast. And of course, Yui Ho-chan came back as, which is important. She was announced as part of the cast this week. I love Ho-chan. She was my original Seiyu crush. So there you go. And there is one scene in particular in the second episode. I won't say which in case you haven't seen it yet, but it's beautifully animated. That's all I'll say. It's just there's a beautifully animated scene, beautifully choreographed scene in the second episode that really shows me there's some quality at work in the production. Which so I'm pretty confident. I'm kind of in the opposite boat. I'm more interested now. And if you like Umineko, there apparently are Umineko elements going to be incorporated in this. So maybe that will wet your whistle a little bit for what's to come. So Higurashi got a lot more interesting and a lot more controversial this week. And that wraps up our very important news segment. Does it wrap up the Notaku podcast? No, like American politics news, it never ends. There's more to come, so stay tuned. What could be coming up next, I wonder?
Topic of the week.
All right. It's time for Tatwa, or Topic of the Week, as it's sometimes called. And we're excited this week to talk about gatekeep. No, we did that one. Let's talk about. I have an interesting topic. Let's talk about the question of ownership. Who? No. Oh shoot. Oh no. How about this one? What are the most important anime of all time, and why? So here's the dealio with this one. I'm not going to set a lot of ground rules here. I'm not going to be a gatekeeper, but I want to just make clear you can use whatever criteria you like, but this is not asking for your best anime of all time, your favorite anime of all time. This is asking for important anime of all time. And influential or whatever important, how you can define important whatever you want. But I just want to make clear that at least from my perspective, what I'm looking for here is not your favorite, not what you think are the best. It's what you think are the most influential or the most important. And you can define that again however you see fit. And no, again, no gatekeeping here. If we pick the same one, that's fine. If we pick different ones, that's fine too. But I think it's an interesting topic, and I'm very curious to get our listeners' takes on it if they want to chime in the comments afterwards. But for now, it's obviously the two of us. So Setsuken, I'll let you go first. Let's each pick three main ones, and then we can do maybe a little lightning round at the end. What would be your first pick for the most important anime of all time, and why?
I will say, if you permit me a little digression, all this talk about gatekeepers has me thinking about Gatekeepers the anime. Did you ever watch that?
No.
Not important at all in the grand scheme of things, but
Nope.
it was okay. It was not bad. Early 2000s, late 90s sci-fi anime. But um, to answer your question, and I'm glad you mentioned not most important to me or not most important to, my tastes, because a lot of the shows I'm going to mention here are not very important to me. But the first one I'll go with, and I'm going to cheat a little bit and mention two because I think they're kind of interchangeable depending on the generation you were in. But Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, for both kind of the same reason, they were more of aimed at kids, at least in the US, and they got a lot of people into anime just because they saw it on television and stuff like that. So I would say Pokemon was the first one for me, and I did like both of these series, Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, for much the same reasons. I think Yu-Gi-Oh is honestly a better show, and the Japanese version is pretty dark. They heavily edited it in the United States. Pokemon, everybody knows Pokemon. It was really nice. I am still shocked at the fact that it's going on still, and I think that's a conversation for another day. But yeah, I would say Pokemon. Pokemon cannot be overstated how important it was for people noticing anime. It was a lot of people's first anime, I would wager.
Okay. I first of all don't disagree with you. I think Pokemon is more influential than Yu-Gi-Oh. And I think if I was to pick, I would probably pick Digimon, and I think you would too, over Pokemon as a series we would
Yes.
watch. But in terms of influential, I agree with you. Pokemon, that's the king of that particular hill, no question about it. And internationally, very, very important. Important in Japan too, but very, very important. My first pick is Astro Boy, Tetsuwan Adam, by Tetsugo Osamu, which is a name you heard in our news segment last week. And because in many respects, this was the first manga and the first anime that really mattered. And as such, it's like Steamboat Willie, except it's not 3 minutes and with no dialogue or whatever Steamboat Willie was. I mean, this is like a whole serious. It was Tetsuka who put both manga and anime in the mainstream in Japan, and as such, I think it could reasonably be argued that there would be no anime or manga industry as we know them today without Tetsuka and without Astro Boy. And Astro Boy was not unknown in the West either. I mean, it got some. It actually did get some. It got watched in foreign countries, especially in Europe, more so than in the United States. In France, I think quite particularly. So, yeah, that would be my first pick. And I don't even personally think it's Tetsuka's best work. I would go with Pluto, probably for that category. And more recently, I think Doro Hedoro, not Doro Hedoro, Dororo, Gomenasai. Dororo is another fine, underrated Tetsuka work, but one that he, I think, maybe had some doubts about because he never finished it. But Astro Boy was the one that really got this all started. It was the one that put it on the map. So that would be my first pick.
Yeah, I agree with you. If there's a top one spot for this topic, it's Astro Boy. I personally, it definitely started it, but I'm of the belief. So there's some people who believe, Guardian Enzo, that the thing that starts everything off is the most important one. I know in the Marvel movies, just to bring some Western media into this discussion, people often say that the Iron Man movie is the best Marvel movie or the most important one. And I don't agree with that just because, even though it was the first one, I don't think it was the best movie or the most popular one. Avengers is, I think, that for this. But in this case, in Astro Boy's case, I think just so many people owe so much to Tezuka and Astro Boy that I think it's fair to say that it was the most important one. And I would be curious to hear somebody argue against that fact.
And maybe we will. Who knows? As I say, we welcome your feedback on this topic. It's kind of naturally anime fans chewing the fat, having a beer kind of a conversation. Okay, what's your next pick?
So my next pick is another double one, but
Cheater.
again, I am cheating, but I think they're the same thing, just at different times. So Dragon Ball Z and Naruto, and for much of the same reasons, but I'll focus on Dragon Ball Z because I think it was a bigger thing than Naruto eventually became. But Dragon Ball Z, everybody knows it. It's the shonen powerhouse. It's what inspired both One Piece, Bleach, and I think it also inspired Naruto as well. So the mangaka. So Toriyama, a lot of people are really, really huge fans of his. This is one of those things where I respect how popular it was on Toonami and all that stuff, and this is one of the few series where I think the dub is better than the sub, personally speaking. But I just hate Goku's voice in the Japanese version, and I think it was because I heard the dub first. But in general, I've never been a huge fan of Dragon Ball Z. I think I mentioned that once before. But I think tournament, battle, manga, anime, that whole thing, there that birthed that whole genre. And I think the stuff we enjoy today, whether it's Boku no Hero Academia or take your pick of shonen,
Bleach.
Bleach, Kimetsu no Yaiba, they all owe it to Dragon Ball. And I think anime as a whole in the West, much like Pokemon, owes a lot of its popularity to Dragon Ball. So
Yeah. I can't disagree with any of that except in me. I don't even think you even needed to include Naruto because I think Naruto is a direct offspring of Dragon Ball. It's Dragon Ball that was the influencer, and Naruto was more influencee. Although it then became influential in its own right later. I agree. Dragon Ball again. I think Dragon Ball. I agree with you. I'm not a huge personally a fan of it, but it's one of those series which is on this list because of how massively popular it is. It's not complicated. It's hugely popular, and because it was and is hugely popular, it remains very influential, and popular things get copied, and Dragon Ball has been very much copied. It is it's still, even among Japanese kids today, teenagers and younger, Dragon Ball remains immensely popular. It has a great staying power. So a great choice. I don't think it's unassailable that it's certainly in anybody's top 10 for most influential, or it should be. Next one for me on the list is by a very famous mangaka, Takeuchi Naoko, who is the wife of another very famous mangaka we've talked about before, Togashi of Yoshio Togashi of Hunter x Hunter fame, and among others, but mostly for me Hunter x Hunter, although people love his other series as well. And that is Bishoujo Senshi Sailor Moon, Pretty Soldier Sailor Moon, Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon, whatever English title you want to give it. Um, no question that the mahou shoujo genre is very, very important in manga and anime history. It can be argued which there have been many influential mahou shoujo series. It can be argued which ones are the most influential, but to me, Sailor Moon is the most influential of the mahou shoujo franchises, and as such, it would be my representative on this list for mahou shoujo. And I think it is important that it be recognized that it is one of the most popular and one of the most important anime genres of all time. And I think it was really Sailor Moon that really, really first wholeheartedly embraced girls as an anime audience. Girls watched Dragon Ball, girls watched Astro Boy, girls watched Pokemon, but those were series which were, generally speaking, shonen in more ways than one, and they more or less targeted male audiences, and male audiences were a majority of the people who watched them. And Sailor Moon was the first, if not the first that really, in a hugely impactful way, brought girls into the anime audience. So that's my next pick.
Yeah, I think I can't disagree with you here. I will say I never liked Sailor Moon. I did watch a couple of episodes, but I was always a Cardcaptor Sakura guy. And the reason I say that is because they came out, at least where I was, on Cartoon Network, and I was in Pakistan at the time. But they came out at around the same time for me,
Mm.
and I always like I love Cardcaptor Sakura, the original series, even though I think it hasn't aged as well nowadays. But I love that a lot more. And Sailor Moon for me, I don't know if this was the case for you, but it always creeped me out a little bit, and it was more so because of Tuxedo Mask. Like he's kind of he's kind of like hanging around, and like I think he dates the main sailor, right?
Yeah. Sailor Moon. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so because there's all the sailors are, and I might be butchering this. All the Maho shoujos are based off of a planet or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
true.
but that always kind of creeped me out, and especially because it was like targeted at girls for a lot of the way it was written, and it was written by a woman, but seems like she prefers older men. I don't know how much of an age gap there is between her and Togashi.
I don't think there is. I think they're the same age,
Yeah,
basically.
but if there's any female listeners to this podcast, write in and explain this to me. Did it not bother you? Did it bother you? Did you ignore it? And then the other thing I wanted to talk about is, man, what kind of conversations do Togashi and uh, the mangaka, have about this stuff? I'm very curious. I'm sure
Yeah.
it's like, I wonder if they just don't talk about manga at all at home.
Oh, they're both geeks. I guarantee you, they talk about manga. They're both otaku. They talk about it. And for the record, I looked it up. She's 53. He's 54. So, but yes, I agree with you. Tuxie is a little creepy, but I think he's intended to be creepy, and I think I appreciate more now than I did originally. That this is some of it's intentional, because she's there's a darkness to her writing too, and I think that that's reflected in part in Tuxedo, and I don't think it's accidental. I think it's intentional. Um, I will say I was more of a Cardcaptor Sakura person too. The reason being that it was exposed to it first. For us in America, it was on network TV, even pre Cartoon Network. It was on Saturday morning cartoons, and that's where I was first exposed to Cardcaptor Sakura. And so I that was kind of my introduction to Mahou Shoujo. So I suppose I have more of an intrinsic connection to it than Sailor Moon. But in terms of influence, Sailor Moon, which predates it by several years, and I think exceeds it in popularity overall, I think still ranks ahead of it in terms of influential. But yes, I'm more of a Sakura person too, actually. So okay, so what is your third choice?
So my third choice, and this is the one where I was debating, but I went with the Death Note, and the reason for that is just how much it pervaded into the mainstream, and how, for a lot of people, especially because of some of the ones I mentioned before, like Dragon Ball, Pokemon, even some of the ones you mentioned, like Sailor Moon, there was this perception for a while, at least in my circles, that anime was for kids. And if you jump into it and actually kind of get acquainted with the medium, that's very much not the case. But that was the perception of it. And then Death Note broke into the mainstream, and everybody, at least in my circles, took anime seriously, and was like, okay, anime is definitely not for kids. This is not something a child could understand. And when I was in high school and I started an anime club with a few of my high school anime buddies, some of which I talked to today, Death Note was the anime we used to get people interested in the club and in anime, and it had 100% success rate of converting people over. And I'm talking about casuals, not like, or people who had never seen anime before. We did the 1-2 punch of Death Note and then Bleach,
Mm.
and then finally we would mix it up between Full Metal Alchemist or something else, but something sci-fi. But um, what are your opinions on Death Note? Because it is one of the few, like I think Dragon Ball and Pokemon, that's actually also gotten a live action movie as
Mm.
well.
Mm.
So there's evidence that it's pervaded into the mainstream
Mm.
and caught Hollywood's evil eye as well.
I think the interesting point with Death Note on this list is I think it comes down to how you define influential. Because I don't think particularly that Death Note has been as influential on other anime as more shows. There are better choices, in my opinion, that you could put on a list for a show that's influencing anime itself as a medium. But I do think that Death Note is very influential in bringing anime to the mainstream. And I think that another show you could put on that list would be Shingeki no Kyojin, would be another one that you could make an argument that belongs on a list like this because it crossed over and became a mainstream cultural phenomenon and not an otaku phenomenon. And I think Death Note, especially in non-Japanese places, did have an influence in that sense. It became quite popular among Muggles. Um, for me, I like Death Note a lot. I think it jumped the shark and it should have been allowed to end when the mangaka wanted it to end. And I think they feel the same way, which is why they wrote that whole story into Bakuman, basically almost verbatim, and got their revenge. And I think that we talked about this in the ownership piece last week. This is why I think you should let creators ultimately be the owners of their own property. If they want to take feedback on board and make changes, let them make the changes. But ultimately, they should not be compelled to make these changes. And I think Death Note's legacy was damaged by it continuing past where it should have stopped. Do you agree?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yes. The second half of the series, because it is two halves.
Hmm.
The first half is immaculate, which is where they wanted to end it.
Yep.
And then the second half is it's rough. It's rough. It's
Good.
still watchable,
Yeah.
but I think it's not the masterclass. And I think Jump has learned from that,
I hope.
because they let Bleach end on its own terms after that. Or maybe it's just a PR speak now that they, but like every series after that has ended on the terms of its mangaka or gotten canceled.
Or
Which
gotten
is
canceled. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. It basically turned out you could see the commitment level of the authors just plummet. It basically turned from Death Note into a Death Note fan fiction in the second half is kind of how I look at it. It was fan
Yep.
fiction written by the original authors, but that's how it played out on screen. It was like you were watching a good Death Note fanfic. Um, my third choice is a show we've discussed ad nauseum here, but I love it. I love it and it drives me crazy, but I still love it. I know you don't love it, but its place on any influential list, I would argue, is absolutely unassailable, and that's Genesis Evangelion, which is a show that um, pretty much broke every barrier to influence that anime could break. It was influential, hugely influential with otaku. It broke out of otaku and became hugely influential with the general public. It was hugely popular with men. It became hugely popular with women. It was popular with kids who didn't really understand it, but found the mecha elements of it to be cool and thought Shinji was relatable. It was hugely popular with adults. It is no less popular, no exaggeration, no less popular now, 25 years after its introduction, than it was when it was at its peak of popularity when it was airing. It's been reinvented, reimagined, repackaged. Ano can't get it out of his system. It is in many respects to me a case can be made for Astro Boy. If it's not Astro Boy, it's Evangelion as the most influential, the way I define the term, the most influential anime franchise of all time. And just in purely practical terms, it has spawned not it's this is the thing about Evangelion. It's so influential. Multiple anime genres have sprung up to imitate it. You couldn't imitate it in a single genre. You had to imitate it. Multiple genres have sprung up to imitate parts of it, and it's much misunderstood. It's much flawed, but it's a flawed masterpiece for me. And the original anime ending is still the best in my opinion. But they all have their say in the lexicon. It's and it's the series more for me personally. It's the series more than any other series that turned me from being a casual anime watcher to being an anime freak and being an anime fan. And that's so both micro and macro to me, for me personally, and for the anime and in the general populace, I think uh, Eva is it. I think it is the modern pinnacle of influencer anime.
So I've got a question for you on this
Sure.
because I don't disagree with you, but I do want to bring up Ghost in the Shell, which is also pretty influential, and it went on to influence a lot of other media as well, not just anime. But to kind of counter that idea, it's not as popular as it once was, and I think that's because of the mismanagement of the franchise more
Right.
so than
Right. Yeah.
Neon Genesis Evangelion. But do you think they're equal? Is one above the other? Because I can't really decide, and I'm curious to kind of get your take on it. Is Evangelion more popular? Are they equal? Is Ghost in the Shell a little bit behind
Okay.
Evangelion?
First of all, we're not talking about popularity here. We're talking about influentialness. At least for me,
Yes,
they're not
yes,
synonymous.
same thing, same thing.
Um, yes, Evangelion is above Ghost in the Shell. It's above Ghost in the Shell in terms of both popularity and influence, in my opinion. I think Ghost in the Shell. It would be. We're going to have a little lightning round section where we talk about some other shows we think could be part of this discussion, and Ghost in the Shell would have been on both of our lists. Absolutely, it's definitely there, but not on the same level with Evangelion for me. Not even super close.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, I think for me, I don't like Evangelion or the original Ghost in the Shell movies, which are the most influential. I love Standalone Complex for Ghost in the Shell.
Mm.
And Evangelion, yeah, well, we've talked about it a lot, but I do respect what it did and what it spawned. And I think my disappointment with Evangelion comes from how much I liked the first half of the series and how much the second half of the series kind of bothered me a little bit, and then bothered me a lot. And then it's the same thing with the movies, where the first movie, as you kind of mentioned, I think at some point, the first movie was pretty darn good. The second one was really good and went in this interesting direction. And so, yeah, Evangelion is definitely influential. And I'm curious to see how it evolves going forward and if it will ever have a stopping point. But we'll have to see.
Well, we talked about this before. I think the next stage, in my opinion, is 5 years from now for the 30th anniversary. I think it's going to get rebooted for TV. That's my prediction. But we'll see. We'll see. So you throw out a couple other titles. Let's be quick here because we don't want to go too long. But what are a couple other titles you would throw out there as influential anime that you think deserve a mention?
Sure.
You do one, I'll do one. Let's do that.
Okay.
We won't respond to each other's picks. We'll just briefly describe what they are.
Sure.
Okay.
Full Metal Alchemist.
Okay, no disagreement. Gundam, because I think the mecha has to be represented above and beyond Evangelion, and you could make arguments for other franchises, but I think that's the most influential one.
Yep.
Okay.
For me, I would say Code Geass as well.
Okay.
That was pretty big and influential. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Captain Harlock, very influential, I think, too.
Yes, I agree. And then I would say Ninja Scroll, the movie, not the TV series. That was pretty big, I think, in the pre fan sub days when you got stuff on VHS.
Okay, next for me is going to be Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind, because that was the Ghibli series that really that defined their ethos and put them on the map.
Yeah, I was also going to say Ghibli, but I'll just say any of the earlier movies by Ghibli.
Okay.
Spirited Away, probably, if I were to pick one.
Most influential outside Japan is probably Spirited Away, I think.
Yep.
Okay, next for you, anything?
I did. Didn't I put Spirited Away as mine?
Spirited Away. Okay, next I'll say Cutie Honey, because I think it the whole ecchi comedy, I think for not as much now as it was, but for a long time there were a lot of imitators of Cutie Honey.
Yep. I would say Love Hina, just because it kind of birthed the harem genre.
Harem rom-coms, yes.
Or Tenchi Muyo. I think Tenchi Muyo came first.
Yeah, Tenchi Muyo did come first, but I think Love Hina was probably more influential.
Yes, I agree.
I would say next Cowboy Bebop, which kind of defined a whole... I think every Netflix anime that they're making now is in some respect, to some extent, trying to be a clone of Cowboy Bebop.
Yes, I'll kind of follow that up with Trigun as well, even though it's not talked about as much these days. Trigun also has a lot of imitators. Vash as a character, I think, has always been imitated by a lot of stories these days.
I'm going to say Touch, because it remains to this day, in terms of the way anime's popularity was measured for a long time, the most popular anime of all time, which is in terms of TV ratings. And sports manga was heavily influenced, probably more influenced by Touch and Captain Tsubasa. Oh, there's others in there. I don't want to go down that road, but Touch, in many respects, still the most popular anime of all time.
Okay. For me, then Mason Ikoku.
Oh, I was going to mention it. Good pick. Yep. Rumiko, yes. Very influential romance series, much copied, I would argue.
Yes.
And while we're talking about that, Ranma is probably a much copied series too, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I haven't finished it, so I should probably go back and do that.
Okay, but my next pick is Akira, which I think was much the same reason you talk about Death Note, maybe a generation earlier. Very important series in showing non-Japanese people that anime was not for kids.
Yep, and someday it will be made into a movie.
Someday.
Or Hollywood will die trying.
Yes.
I actually don't like Akira either, but
okay,
that's a trend, isn't it? Okay, for me...
Let's make this last one your closer.
Yep. I'll go with Shingeki no Kyojin. That's fair to put there.
It's low hanging fruit, but it's definitely deserves to be picked. It's mainstream. Go to Comic-Cat sometime and you'll see how massively popular that show is in every demographic. And my last pick is going to be Aria, because I think it's more recent kind of influence, but in anime over the last decade, we see a lot of these types of melancholy, cute girls healing type shows. And I think Aria was really, in many respects, the pioneer in that subgenre. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I only watched one season of Arya, and I get the appeal, but that's definitely not the kind of show I enjoy watching. But yes.
Yeah, yeah. It's not a huge favorite of mine, but I think it's been hugely intentional. And I know I'm cheating, but I have to throw out one more because I think it often gets undercredited, and it's still actually going, and that's Okiku Furikabute, the baseball manga, because I don't think there would be a Haiku. I don't think there would be a lot of the Koroko no Basket. I don't think there would be a lot of the cross gender appealing sports anime that we see today. Yomushi Pedal, even if it weren't for Okiku for Ufuri, really influenced a lot of people talk about Prince of Tennis, but I actually think Ufuri is more influential on this next generation of cross appeal sports manga and sports anime than any other show, and I think it deserves a lot of credit for that.
Okay, I get one more than two.
Okay.
I'll finish off with One Punch Man
Mm.
season one. We don't talk about season two.
Okay, what did that influence though? Who did that influence? In what way was that?
I think I think for a lot of the things that I mentioned on the list, it just broke into the mainstream. People who don't generally watch anime in the West have seen One Punch Man on Netflix.
All right,
So
fair enough. Okay, there you go. That's a good list, and I expect to hear from you guys and let us know some other options. And if the ones we think are interesting, we're going to try to. I'll see if we can fit them into the next show at some point, or actually Setsuken will. So thank you very much. And that is. Okay, I'm sure that Setsuken, with his masterful editing skills, could make this all look seamless. But I'm gonna go mea culpa here, and just be totally honest that we both realized after the fact that we were in total agreement. We should have talked about Gurren Lagann here because, no, it wouldn't have been either of our top three. But basically, Gurren Lagann gave birth to Trigger. Really, Trigger sprung directly from Gurren Lagann, pretty much. And Gurren Lagann is an incredibly influential show in an aspect we haven't talked about necessarily, which is that if you look at the staff list of so many anime now and over the last decade, there are so many Gurren Lagann veterans on those staff lists. It's crazy. The people who worked on that show have just populated so many staff lists in anime over the years, including one I want to mention, Dansei Bunri no Crime Edge, the Severing Crime Edge, which I really liked that show and most people didn't. And I remember thinking when that show first came out and even mentioning, gosh, this reminds me so much of Gurren Lagann. And people were saying I was crazy. It's nothing like Gurren Lagann. What are you talking about? And then I looked at the staff list, and like literally every major name on the staff list for Crime Edge was a Gurren Lagann primary animator, artist, director, assistant director, etc. So that Gurren Lagann, we just wanted to give it its due, right? Because it really deserves it.
yeah, and I think the reason I totally spaced on that one is because it's one of my personal favorites. So I think that in my mind almost discounted it from that, but I think you bring up a really important point, which is it might not have birthed a genre or imitators or stuff like that, except for the fact that Trigger keeps trying to
Yes.
recapture the Gurren Lagann magic. I think Promare, if you ever saw that, they're trying really, really hard to beat Gurren Lagann in that one. But yes, I agree totally. And yeah, we before all the angry pitchforks and haters and people, rightly so, call us out on it, we have preemptively, all according to plan, corrected ourselves.
And there you go. Okay, so now we can refocus our eyes on the horizon and start looking towards the next segment on our broadcast. And now let's do maybe Enzo's favorite part, which is the manga recommendation section, because Enzo loves his manga. And we talked about this one in the news segment several weeks ago, but I wanted to basically give it its own chunk of the manga recommendations corner because I really think this series is just getting better and better. And I'm just loving it so much. And so this week's pick is Boku no Kokoro no Yabai Yatsu, The Dangers in My Heart. And it's by Sakurai Norio, who is the author of Mitsudomoe. Unfortunately, this one is not licensed yet. So we can't point you towards a license on it, but it is a great series. It will be licensed at some point. I feel very confident, and it's going to get an anime at some point. I feel pretty confident of that. Again, nominated for the Manga Taisho twice, won the Sugi no Kura Manga Award. It's just the more I watch this series or the more I read this series, Setsuken, the more I just love it. It's a great romantic comedy set in junior high school, which is a great setting for romantic comedies. It really captures the innocently etchy ethos better, I think, than any other anime, any other manga currently going. And there is a boom going on in junior high school rom coms at the moment with some good representation, but this is the best of the bunch. And it just keeps getting better and better. And it's just the little things that happen. One of the reasons that I love a series I think we both like, Kono Bijutsubu Niu Mande ga Aru, is that it rather than the kids being miniaturized versions of high school students or oversized versions of grammar schoolers, they really act like junior high kids. And that's what I think is true with Boku no Kokoro. It really captures that feeling of being in junior high school so beautifully. And it's a painful feeling for a lot of people that maybe you're thinking, I don't want to recapture that feeling. But trust me, it really works. And it's funny. It's hilariously funny, but it's also incredibly powerfully moving in some ways. There's just such an interesting. The main character is so sympathetic because he's smart, but he's socially awkward. And there's a whole situation where he finds himself falling for this girl who's really popular, and she's way out of his league, and yet she obviously is as into him as he is into her. In fact, she's into him first, I think. And the thing is that she is no more like she first appears to be than he is. She's like a total goofball and with a weird sense of humor, and it just they're just a great pair, and it's a great series. And I really think this is worth seeking out. I think this is on the cusp. It's already pretty popular and it's already much critically acclaimed. But and by the way, the great Twitter follow too, because there's a tremendous amount of great fan art for this series that comes out. That's just every day you see it. And if you follow the mangaka, she retweets a lot of this stuff. Again, this is Sakurai Norio. And so there's great fan art for this series and a great Twitter dialogue on it. It has a really engaged and active fan base. This has all the triggers of being a sensation. This could end up being really big at some point in the future. Whether it is or not, it's still great. But I just can't recommend this series highly enough. It really is fast becoming one of my favorite ongoing manga, Boku no Kokoro no Yabai Yatsu. And we even talked about this one a little bit before. I think you said you'd scanned a couple chapters of it, right?
No, not this one.
Oh,
I am saving myself for it because either when the first volume gets licensed here, or if the anime comes out, whichever happens first, I'll read it then. But yeah, I looked at the cover art and I've looked at some of the inserts and it looks really good. The story seems interesting to me as well. There's a height difference between the main
oh
characters,
yes.
which I like as well. That whole concept. I think that's the what was it? Lovely Complex. I think
Yeah,
that
lovely
did
complex.
it.
Lovecom, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that's a completely different show from our series from this one. But yeah, I'm interested in this. I'm waiting for it to get officially released.
Right.
I actually I've been getting more into reading manga again, and I blame you for it, Guardian Enzo.
Guilty.
And this is one of those where I want to read it in bed in physical form.
That's kind of how I read it too. It's a great read in bed manga for me as well. but mine is on a tablet. But yeah, I think the height difference part of it is interesting because Lovecom is a great example of how that's applied in a high school setting, and this applies it with the kids that are about 3 years younger, and in a totally realistic and believable way. Junior high school is funny that way, isn't it? Because sometimes the boys are really kind of short and they haven't hit that growth spurt yet, and the girls tower over them. And I was probably, I guess, about average height in junior high school, I guess, but in seventh grade that was pretty short. And so the girls towering over you, especially if there's a romantic spark there, that's really an awkward and uncomfortable thing, isn't it? And it's a kind of a uniquely junior high school thing, and that's something, again, there's so many uniquely junior high elements that this series captures. You know what it reminds me of, actually, now that I think about it to a certain extent, is Freaks and Geeks. And it never
Mm.
it never occurred to me until now, but this conversation and some of your commentary has put me in mind of it. And it's not Freaks and Geeks. There's no, like, it's not a best friends scenario, but there are a lot of similarities. And Freaks and Geeks does a great job at capturing that moment in your life, doesn't it? Have you seen Freaks and Geeks?
Yes, yes, I've
Yeah.
seen some of it.
Yeah, it's a great show. Stranger Things owes a great debt to Freaks and Geeks, by the way. I know you haven't seen Stranger Things yet, shame on you, but it owes a great debt to Freaks and Geeks. But there are some definite kind of overlapping sympathies between The Dangers in My Heart and Freaks and Geeks. There's because they're both really, really great at capturing that awkward and painful moment in time when you're a 13, 14-year-old boy and the world seems to tower over you. And you know how in junior high school, everything is kind of scary. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean when I say that?
Yes.
That's what this manga captures in a really, really empathetic and powerful way, is that feeling of going to school every day and just being just a little bit terrified of everything.
Mm.
And yet there's this wonderful world opening up before you that you're just getting little glimpse of it, and potential and possibility. And that's really what this series is like. It's that glimpses of that potential and possibility, and that overlying sense of impending terror that just about anything could ruin your life at the drop of a hat. And like I say, maybe not everybody will want to relive that, but I think if you wanted to relive it in Stranger Things, or you wanted to relive it in Freaks and Geeks, this is in that same vein, Boku no Kokoro. And it's in that same vein quality wise too, which is high praise for me because I love both those shows. So
Yep.
love it. That's my manga recommendation for the week. Not licensed yet, sadly, but it will be. I'll be shocked in the next year if there's no. We got to get either a license or an anime, maybe both. I'll be shocked if one or both of those things don't happen. And then Setsuken, you can finally read it.
Yes. Or I don't know. I think you've been doing such a good job. I kind of want to go and read it. So I'm going to ask you to stop.
Okay, and that's our manga recommendation corner for this week. So there you go. And we're done. We're not done. No, there's still stuff out there, isn't there? What could be coming up next? I wonder. Let's give the Magic 8 Ball a shake and see what it comes up with.
Haiku challenge.
Okay, so the next section is all signs point to yes. No, that can't be right. Oh, no. It's the Enzo's Haiku Challenge. That's what it is. The section where, whether you believe it or not, it's true. Setsuken gives me a theme for a haiku, and I have to come up with something on the spot without having heard what the theme is. I give you my word, Setsuken, I'm telling the truth, right?
Yes, yes. You totally can't see this one coming.
All right, so I'm ready. Hit me. What is this week's haiku theme?
Ikari Shinji from Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Oh, Ikari Shinji. Very good.
Hmm.
Okay.
And while you think about that one, I'll mention why I don't like Ikari Shinji and why I do like him. So I like his daddy issues thing and his whole thing with his mom, and I think that's very well developed. But and I don't think this is a huge like surprise, but boy, does the guy whine and moan and bitch and it's one of the reasons I like the new movies is because he seemed to do that less. And then the third movie came out, and you know, you anybody who's seen it, I'm not spoiling anything here. Uh, Shinji and whining is, I think, synonymous with Evangelion at this point.
Okay, I am ready with my haiku, but I can also rebut that first. What would you like me to do first, the haiku or the rebuttal of your incorrect argument?
Let's do Haiku first and then
Okay.
rebuttal.
Okay, ready? Here we go. This is the Ikari Shinji haiku, and I want to thank you for unwittingly doing me a favor and giving me a name that was 5 syllables. Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
Ikari Shinji, just pilot the damn robot. That's one lousy dad.
Okay, that one is your best one yet. I think that one I might actually want a calligraphy for, and that was very effective. You just put in the memes of this whole thing and like what he is. It was beautiful.
There
You
you
brought
go.
a tear to my eye. What's your rebuttal? What's your rebuttal?
You can tell whether someone understands Eva or not by whether they empathize with Shinji. And
I empathize with him,
okay,
but I still think he's a little bitch.
I think personally, the little bitch mentality is definitely a large plurality, if not a majority, of Eva watchers. I personally think those people are betraying that they don't understand the character, but that's just my opinion. We want to talk about the ways Eva is influential. The whiny main character thing is definitely one of them. There's a whole generation of sci-fi shows since then that have had whiny main characters. The difference is, I think a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them have been whiny without having the same underpinning foundation of depth that Shinji has that makes it all part of the quilt of his character. Shinji Shinji is Ano, first of all. I think that's pretty well established. And Shinji Shinji is Shinji is humanity too, to a certain extent. I don't want to get too grandiose about it. I'll just then we could get into this whole conversation. I think I want to say Shinji, I get you. I feel you. You have a defender in me. That's all I have to say.
Well, here's the thing with Shinji, and we'll close it on this. I understand him too because I was him in that particular age, and that's why I think he's a little bitch. So
Okay.
there's some self-loathing happening there as well.
Okay.
And we'll leave it at that. But
yeah,
that to credit Evangelion for doing one thing.
Okay. And that whole thing with Asuka in the hospital, yeah, I could have done without that, Shinji. That would be my one thing. But okay. So there you
I
go.
did not do that. Let's be clear. That was not me at his age.
No, me neither. But yeah, that's yeah. Okay. That is our manga recommendation and Shinji argument corner this week. Thank you for that interesting suggestion as always, Setsuken. And we're almost there. We're at the home stretch. We're coming around the final turn. I can see the checkered flag. It's waving, but we have another lap of the racetrack to make. So let's think about what would be a good topic for our final lap.
Listener questions.
All right, my peeps, we are ready for your section of the show where we figuratively, though God knows, thank God, not literally, but we figuratively turn the microphone over to you and we answer some of your listener questions. And just as a reminder, you can submit those questions via my Patreon, patreon.com/Guardian Enzo. You can, of course, leave comments on the Notaku YouTube channel. You can leave them in the review section on iTunes or Spotify if you like. And I think you can comment on Spotify. Maybe you can't. I don't remember. And then we have Twitter. We have a plethora of options for you. We have at Guardian Enzo, at Setsuken, and we have at Notaku Chat, all of which can take your podcast question. Notaku Pod. Sorry. And we also have Notaku at anime-evo.net, which is still our official Notaku email for now. Yes?
Yes.
Perfect. So we have a couple of questions this week. Again, we mentioned earlier we got some great feedback on our last ownership section, but we have some also questions too. The first one is from one of those commenters, actually, Blastix from LIA, Blastrix, excuse me, from LIA, who asks us, is there any anime which you would like, mostly based on its art and style, not so much on the story? A great question. Any thoughts on that one?
Yes, I would just say Kekai Sensen, even though the story is good too, but the art and the style of Blockade, I think
Hmm.
is the English title.
Blood Blockade Battlefront.
Yes, that one. I just call it Kekai Sensen,
Hmm.
but that one, even though the story is good too, the art and the style is what elevates it for me.
Okay, that's a great choice. I would throw out, believe it or not, but I think it matches the spirit of the question, Guilty Crown, which I certainly don't like based on the story. But I think it is a beautiful series to look at. Don't you agree? I mean, I think it visually it's gorgeous.
Yes,
And it has nice music too. Yeah, it has
yeah.
great music too. But in the context of this question, I think art and style, I think music fits in as part of that. So I think you can even incorporate music into the answer. So I would say Guilty Crown. And Red Data Girl is another one I would throw in there, the old PA Works
Hmm.
show, which I kind of like the story on that one, but I also think that's my favorite, probably my favorite PA Works show, along with Uchiten Kozoku, but those are kind of atypical PA Works shows. Red Data Girl is kind of the ultimate PA Works style.
Yep.
So those would be the two I would
What
probably. And
about Kingdom season one?
And I was going to say, oh God, the flashbacks, the horror. Yeah, I was going to say most Kyoto animation shows we could also throw into that for me.
Yes.
I don't love the stories on most of them, but they vary. But I don't love the stories on most of them, but the visuals on all of them are wonderful. But ironically, my favorite KyoAni visual show is also probably my favorite annual KyoAni story show, which is Hyoka.
Yeah,
So,
same.
which is an incredibly beautiful anime. It's just so beautiful. But I didn't use it as my answer to the question because I also love the story on it too. Even though there are some clunker episodes, but generally speaking, I love the story. So thank you, Blastrix, for a really good question there. And then from our old friend Monsieur Bleu, from France, leaves us this question on LAA. More a question for the podcast. I was wondering if you could tell us about the streaming offers networks in Japan, even though we are not able to use them where we are. So, the nature of Blue Blue's question, he's asking, are there a lot of streaming options in Japan that don't exist in the West? And my answer to that is yes. But there are also streaming options that do exist in the West because YouTube is used for anime streaming in Japan, and we talked about that new YouTube channel that was being set up a couple weeks ago in our news segment in Japan. Netflix Japan, of course, Hulu Japan, of course. These are all available in the West, but the anime that show, even Amazon Prime Japan, even there's
Yes.
anime that show up on the Japanese versions of all these streaming services that don't show up on the Western versions of them, or at least not right away. But
Yep.
those, even though they're Western companies, they're very important. They're very important Japanese streaming services. There's also something called Anime Log, which is a big streaming service for anime in Japan, and of course Nico Nico, which most people are aware of, is a very big streaming service in Japan. And then yeah, there's others. I let's see what else. There's DTV is a Japan only one. I don't think DTV exists internationally. But
Yes.
they have a lot of anime on DTV. There's another one called Paravi,
Mm.
which I don't know if they have anime, but it's a pretty big streaming service in Japan. But the big streaming services, honestly, the overall, not necessarily just for anime, but overall, the biggest streaming services in Japan is probably Netflix and Hulu, just like it is in
Yep.
America. So, any thoughts on this?
I don't know if Hulu's as big as Netflix or
Nothing is
Amazon.
as big as Netflix, but it's pretty big.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you. I think some of the other parts of this question were equally interesting, like how he talked about that the movie for Kimitsu. The producer said he was going to make it available on 20 services.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll take his word
eh,
for it.
yeah, in France they don't even have 10.
Yeah.
I think 20 is way too much, and I do think we're getting streaming fatigue. Like we mentioned Serie no Moribito a couple of weeks ago and how it was being streamed on High Dive, and I was happy, but I also groaned because I'm like, there's only so many streaming services you can afford, um, and between Funimation and Crunchyroll and how bad their players are, Funimation is worse. But
Mm.
all that stuff. There's a ton of issues with how many streaming services there are as well. So yeah, I feel like we're going back to cable TV almost, and doubly so for anime. Now it's just streaming service instead of channels.
That's
So
a horrible thought. But yeah, I don't know, honestly, Blue. I don't know. Merci for the question. I don't know what these 20 services are, honestly. Most of them are probably pretty niche. And some of them are I know for a fact, some of them are streaming services that are directly streaming, specializing in cell phones and smartphones. And I'm
hmm.
sure that's a part of a lot of what he's talking about too. Uh, so very interesting. And Blue also asks us about speaking about Tito Kubo, the Bleach mangaka. Did you or Setsuken take a look at Burn the Witch? And since I didn't, I'll turn that over to you. Have you seen Burn the Witch?
Not yet. Fully
Okay,
intend to this weekend. So probably tomorrow or day after. I do believe it's related to Bleach, which is interesting.
I think.
Yeah, I think from what I know, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's set in the same universe, but it's like in England or London. So Shinigami or Soul Reapers are in Japan, but then the European version of that is, I think, witches. But
Yeah.
I'll report back when I watch it. I believe it's based off a one shot that is becoming a series, perhaps. I don't know, but we'll see. Kubo Tight's art is really good. I'm kind of worried that it's a cute girls. It's not a cute girls, but it's a girls doing girl things,
Okay.
which because both of the characters are female, and I've just been conditioned, especially after the whole ReZero thing that I talked about. I even blocked out the series name. That every time I see multiple girl characters and no male characters, I just start worrying. But I think it'll be good. I'll watch it and report back probably next week.
Yeah, worrying with good reason, I would say. And that's I think you're probably more of a Bleach fan than me, so I think I'll take your word for it on whether that's worth my time to check out. But again, thank you, Blue, for those questions, and thank you to everyone for your questions. And as always, we welcome them, and you have various places you can leave them, and get them to us, and we'll get them on the air. We're always happy to answer listener questions. And with that, we have come to the end of another journey. And it's been wonderful. I want to just say animeevo.net and lostinanime.com are out there for your reading pleasure. We're in the new season. We both got a lot of new first impressions posts and new show posts out there, plus the stuff that's continuing, like my beloved Major Second, among other things. So a busy week for the websites. I'll be finishing up Great Pretender, I'm sure, in the next week or so also. And just to say thank you as always for listening, and thank you, Setsuken, for participating. It's always been great. And any last thoughts for our listeners out there?
Halloween is coming.
Halloween is
Thank you very
coming.
much.
Yeah,
We'll have more on that soon.
we will. Okay. Thank you, everybody. And as always, stay frosty.